Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Great to have you joining us on the program. Today on the show, we feature a conversation with Taurus Montgomery. He is the pastor of Pioneer Memorial Church, Harbor of Hope in Michigan. He's the author of the book Set on Fire, How Life's Devastations Can Lead You to Your Destiny. Taurus Montgomery's story is an incredible one, and I met him in Atlanta a couple months ago. We just happened to be at the same table at a Nation of Coaches Summit that was taking place back in May in Atlanta at the Chick-fil-A headquarters, of all places, and didn't know Taurus. Just introduced myself. He had some guys with him, and we were talking about the podcast, and the guys who were with him looked at me and said, "You need to tell Taurus's story on Sports Spectrum." And so I asked him, "Tell me your story." And I was blown away, shaking my head numerous times as I listened to the story of this guy growing up from age 12 to 19, trapped in a lifestyle of crime, fast money, drug abuse, bad decision-making, poor academic performance, wasted athletic opportunities, and now, in a life that was on its way towards destruction, has been restored and redeemed by God to allow him to share his inspirational story across the country and across the world, over 20 states and internationally, to Zambia, Ethiopia, India, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Guyana. Other countries across the world have heard Taurus's story. And the man, he's just an incredible storyteller and lived a extremely difficult life, and his devotion now to help tell others about the life that he lived when he was younger, and appealing to young people to try and break that chain, to try and break that cycle and redeem them and restore them and understand that they have value, is so inspiring to me. You'll love this conversation and the passion from Taurus Montgomery, author of the book Set on Fire, How Life's Devastations Can Lead to Your Destiny. He joins us now on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Taurus, welcome to the podcast.
Jason, man, glad to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story.
You know, it's funny you say that, Taurus, because we all have stories, right? And, you and I had never known each other until we just happened to be at the same Nations of Coaches Summit event in Atlanta a few months ago. And I always wonder, when God is working behind the scenes and he puts people at the same place to meet, I think about you and I meeting, and we were just happened to be at the same table. And I was telling you about the podcast, and the guys that you brought with you to this summit were telling me about you and your story. And I was like just listening to it and shaking my head like, man, we got to have this guy on. So I'm really glad that you're here. Let's start with that conference for a second, and that Nations of Coaches Summit. Tell us why it was important for you to be at something like this, because Nations of Coaches have been a great partner with us. We've done a bunch of interviews with the people who lead Nations of Coaches, Tommy Kyle, and then others who've been a part of the Nations of Coaches Summit. So for you, why was it important for you to be at an event like that?
Man, it was important for me to be there because, my personal mission is in agreement with the mission of Nations of Coaches. And a friend of mine who he sent me a link to this conference. He knows what I'm about. He knows what my mission is and what my goals are in terms of trying to really be a character and leadership coach for basketball players in particular, but student athletes in general. Yeah. And so when he sent me the link, I was like, wow, okay, this is great. This is right up my alley. And it's always good to see other people who are doing something that you're doing, and they're doing it with just as much or sometimes even more passion and energy than you are. And so to be around that type of people, and being that audience, being that crowd, was something that was important for me, for my own encouragement, as well as for me to be able to learn and see what other people are doing in order to sharpen my tool, and so that I can do more effectively what I'm trying to do as well.
Yeah, and the networking is so important. I know we hear that word. That's a buzzword in any sort of culture or business is networking, networking, networking. But it really is about that community of like-minded people, believers who have Christ at the center of their life, who want to do good in the sports world. Did you find that? Obviously, you and I connecting was a great thing, but did you find that being able to network and talk and hear about other people's stories?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the table that we were sitting at, there were other people, who had, different journeys that they were on. There were, just a lot of different guys in the room who came from the presenters who shared. It kind of reminded me of the story of, Elijah when he was, complaining to God. He felt like, man, I'm the only one. I'm the only one in Israel. I'm the only one who's, faithful to you, serving you. And God was like, nah, man, calm down. I have, more than 7,000 who have not bowed their knee to Baal, and so sometimes we can feel like we're alone because we're doing what we're doing in isolation. But to me, again, to be there and to see that, man, that not only is, Nations of Coaches, something that's been around for quite some time, but it's backed by an organization like, Chick-fil-A, who's helping to really put the message out there
Yeah.
to help empower these coaches and players on the collegiate level, with the message of, character development. And it's not just, playing a basketball game. That's not the end game. The end game is for us to live our lives in a way that's going to honor our creator. And so, yeah, man, I was able to, connect with other people there and hear their stories, and it was refreshing.
Taurus Montgomery is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Your book, Set on Fire, is a powerful one. You gave me a copy at that Nations of Coaches event. I've been able to read through it a little bit. And this book, in many ways, just tells your life story. So let's dive into that a bit. Take us back to Mobile, Alabama, growing up in the inner city, and really what that title, Set on Fire, stems from. Take us back.
Sure, sure. Well, like you say, I was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama. And, my neighborhood wasn't the best of neighborhoods. Grew up at a time where there's a lot of, violence. You had my neighborhood was, drug infested. There was a lot of, gang violence and stuff like that. And, growing up in the inner city, one of the things you end up doing is you kind of have to grow up faster than a normal kid would. And so I started doing things at a very early age that I'm definitely not proud of. I got into, smoking marijuana when I was 12 years old. And from 12 to 19, I was smoking, drinking, robbing people, just doing a whole bunch of crazy things. And it had a lot to do with my environment, my household. My parents were going through some issues. My father was abusive, verbally, physically, to my mom. I saw him do some brutal things to my mother. And I think at a very early age, and I saw a lot of that happen when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. And I make a connection between, what I saw as a kid growing up and the things that I was kind of traumatized by as a kid, having a direct correlation to when I started smoking marijuana. You know what I'm saying? It's easy to fall into that because it's around you. It's all around you. Your friends are doing it. I had older cousins who were either selling it or using it. And so getting caught up in that world early on was very easy because because it was so near me.
Hmm. Hmm. Tell me about you. I mean, you talk about that lifestyle of crime and fast money and drug abuse, especially in those formative years, ages 12 to 19. I think about my ages 12 to 19 and how formative they were in my
Right.
life. And I also grew up in a dysfunctional home as well. Nothing like what you went through, but give us a glimpse of some of the things that you saw and experienced. You write about a lot of those in the book, but maybe some of that life of crime that you talk about and certainly some of the different things that you saw living in an environment like that.
Right, right. So, for example, there were people who lived inside of my household. My father had, he had people that he knew. And, my father's tricky, man. He, on one hand, he wants to help people. On the other hand, he had his own demons he was fighting, and I don't think he ever, overcame those things. And so,
Mm.
the issues that he was dealing with would spill over into, his relationship with my mom and his abuse, on her. But at the same time, like I said, he would be trying to help people. But some of those people that he would try to help, they were alcoholics or they were, addicted to crack cocaine. And so I saw at a very early age, people inside of my household, using crack cocaine, being strung out on alcohol. Being addicted to alcohol and, like literally watching people use drugs, 10 years old, 11 years old. And then, on top of that, man, in the book, I talk about how the living conditions were certainly not the best. I remember going, 2 years without having any gas on in our house. 9 months with no electricity. The water was off and on all the time. And there were times as a kid, I remember when I was in elementary school, where, my brother and I, we would go to school way earlier than when the school opened. But the janitor, he would be there all the time, man, to open up the school for us and let my brother and I come in and, like take a little wash off inside the bathroom at the school, because I guess I don't know if he was aware of our situation, but that's how we would take baths sometimes. I would go to school, man, wearing the same clothes, every day, not having showered. Once a week, we may go down to my grandmother's house, which was like 30 minutes away, just to take a shower. So, those are some of the types of things that I kind of grew up around. And being in that environment, like I said, it made it easy for me to fall into the trap of, drugs and alcohol and all that type of stuff. And, start running with the wrong crew and, carrying a gun, getting involved in fights, those types of things. But the beautiful thing about the game of basketball is that it gave me some sense of, like, man, if I could make it to the league, right? If I could play this game and go to the next level, then my family don't have to live like this. We can get out of this neighborhood. We can live in a nice house, a nice community. And so in the midst of all of that, I still had this love for the game of basketball that I felt would help take me out of the hood. But unfortunately, I just kind of got so caught up in that lifestyle that it drowned out my dreams of trying to make it to the league or playing college basketball.
The title of the book, Set on Fire, is actually a metaphor for your life, but it's also reality in a lot of ways. Can you share that story on where the title comes from and really where it was birthed?
Sure, absolutely. November 7th, 1996, I never forget it. I was in my bedroom and I heard a loud bang on my door, boom, 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 boom. And I was asleep because it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I heard it again, boom, 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 boom. And after that, I heard my younger brother, his name is Powell. And he screamed my name, Taurus, get up, Taurus, get up. The house on fire, get up. And so I jumped up out of my sleep, jumped up out of my bed, ran outside. And my brother, my dad, one of my other brothers, we're outside watching the only place we call home is going up in flames. And, tears coming down my eyes. I'm feeling like, man, wow, we're homeless now. Where are we going to live? And so for the next couple of weeks or so, we're bouncing around from one family member house to another family member house. And then, finally, there was a family who let us come and live with them. We stayed with this family for like 2 years for free. And this family, they happened to be Christians. And because of their faith, they allowed us to live with them. And we started going to church. And I tell people all the time that, the biggest blessing, the best thing that ever happened in my life was my house burning down, my house being set on fire. Now, the way that it was set on fire is, we didn't have any gas in the house. And so my brother, he put a hot plate next to his bed to stay warm. And we used to do this all the time, and so it wasn't like a one-time thing. This is the first time something happened like this. No, we used to use a hot plate, plug it up, keep it in the room. We under all these covers, and we're trying to keep warm because there's no gas in the house, right? And but on this particular night, the curtain, well, it really wasn't a curtain. It was a sheet hanging up, serving as a curtain. But the curtain somehow caught fire because maybe it was too close to the hot plate. And I mean, the rest is history. The house, catches on fire. The wall catches on fire. The sheet catches on fire. The wall catches on fire. Next thing you know, the whole room is on fire. And then my brother rushing in to get me, and out we go. And the reason why I tell people that is the best thing that ever happened in my life is because had my house not burned down, I would have never moved in with this Christian family, which means I would have never really started going to church, and the church had a basketball team and some pretty girls. And that was the main reason why I wanted to keep on going to church, right? Gave me a reason to go to church. I tell people, God was working in that, having a basketball team and having this pretty girl that I was attracted to. And so eventually I started going to church. My younger brother, he made the decision to give his life to Christ. He was 15 years old at the time. And then, so when we moved out of that household and back into our home, 2 years later, it was kind of fixed up, but not really fixed up. But my brother, he brought Christ with him. And I would see the relationship that he had with God, the things that he stopped doing and the things that he started doing. And that really made a huge impact on my life. I tell people all the time, even though I had stopped going to church, when we moved out of that household, church moved in with me. And that was my brother and his lifestyle. There would be times, man, I'm coming home, I'm drunk, I'm high as I don't know what. I'm crawling through the window of the house. It's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would see my 15-year-old brother, 3 o'clock in the morning, in the living room, prostrate, praying. And he was praying for me, And so eventually, February 1st, 2001, on a Thursday morning, about 9 o'clock, I dropped down on my knees and I said, God, whatever you want to do in my life, have your way. I was 19 years old at the time. And I tie all of that back to my house being set on fire. And that's the title, how life's devastations can lead you to your destiny.
Taurus, I love that story and your testimony of coming to faith. I love that you remember the day that it happened, not just the day, but that
absolutely.
It was,
Yep.
every moment of it. So what happens after that? How does that change your life forever? I mean, you are a pastor now and an author of a book and doing some great things, character coaching and all that. But what happened in the early days, weeks, months after you came to faith in Christ? What did you see this transformation happen in your life?
Oh, man. So, the day it happened, like I said, February 1st, 2001, Thursday morning, 9 a.m., I was at a community college that I went to go play basketball in Mississippi. And, the people there, the guys I was hanging around with, they knew me they used to call me Mobile, right? Because I was from Mobile. They used to call me Mobile. And we used to go to the clubs all the time. We partying, drinking, smoking, doing all kind of crazy stuff. And so when I made that decision to come to Christ, they were like blown away. they were like, man, what happened to you? And I'm telling them, man, I made a decision to give my life to God. And, like, man, stop lying, stop playing. And they would try to, mess with me about coming to the club tonight, that type of stuff. But I would say, man, about 3 to 4 days after that, I had this experience that God used to really open my eyes. So my brother had given me a Bible. When I left home to go to school, he gave me this Bible. And when he gave it to me, I wasn't, a Christian at the time. So I just set it on top of my stereo and never really read it. But now that I'm a Christian, I've given my life to Christ, I want to read it. So I pick it up this one particular evening and I started reading. And as I'm reading, I got really discouraged because I was having a hard time trying to understand what I was reading. And so I just felt, man, there's no other way that I can describe it other than, man, it was like the devil himself came and was standing over my shoulder and just speaking so much doubt and negativity. Like, what are you doing? You don't even understand this. What about these girls? What about, your friends? You had money in your pocket. Now you're talking about you following God. You can't even understand the Bible. So all of these thoughts are just racing through my head. And, so what I did was, man, the only thing that I could do, I just dropped down on my knees. I started crying out to God, God, please, I don't want to go back to a life of sin. I don't want to go back to that lifestyle, God. I'm like crying, pleading, begging God to give me power, strength to overcome whatever this is that I'm dealing with. So now, mind you, I had been reading, prior to me opening up the Bible, I was reading some Bible studies, like a series of Bible lessons and so on and forth, teaching you about God and the Son and the Holy Spirit and, what it means to grow in Christ and all these different things. And I would say, man, that had gone on for probably 3-4 hours, and then I actually cracked open and said, I'm gonna read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. That was my goal, right? And one day I'm reading Genesis to Revelation. So, man, I get this discouraging moment, dropped on my knees, and I pray. And once I get up, I walk outside of my dorm room, and I see a couple of guys. They were shooting crap, as we call it. They rolling dice, they gambling. We should do that in the dorm.
Yeah.
And so then one of them asked me to come and be a part of it. And I said, man, I was like, nah, man, I don't gamble anymore. And they was like, you don't gamble no more. What's wrong with that? And I don't even know what I told them as my answer, my reason why. I had never read in the Bible about, I just said I don't gamble anymore. And man, I went over to those guys and started talking to them. And as I'm talking to them, they started asking me other spiritual questions. And I'm just sharing with them the answers that I know based on some of the stuff that I had been reading. It started out with just 2 guys, Jason. Mm-hmm. And the 2 guys went from 2 guys to 4 guys, 4 guys to 8 guys, 8 guys to 16. Next thing you know, man, the entire dorm is right there sitting down like they're in church or something. And I'm just up there speaking to them. They're asking me questions. I'm giving them answers. They're asking me questions. I'm giving them answers. I pray with them. And it was like we had church, and it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning now. And when that was all said and done, man, they was all like, thanking me, appreciating me, saying how much they admire me and all this type of stuff. And I go back into my dorm room, and I'm just like, wow, this is. And the Lord spoke to me that day, and He said, this is what I have called you to do. Like, I've called you to teach and share my word, especially with young men, And so from that day forward, man, I just pursued that call. I transferred from that school. I went to a school called Oakwood University. It's a HBCU in Huntsville, Alabama. Mm-hmm. It's a Christian school, Seventh-day Adventist Christian school. And I did theology at that school. I got accepted, man. My GPA was like a 1.9. I got accepted on academic probation. By the grace of God, I graduated with a 3.5. And that my time there at that school was, God's way of just really helping shape and form me into, a leader. When I got there, man, I joined an organization called NAPS. It stands for the National Association for the Prevention of Starvation. It's a group, a nonprofit organization based on the campus at that time. And, man, I got a chance to travel around the world. Like, we would go to juvenile detention centers. And that's really when I think God just confirmed His call in my life. We went to a juvenile detention center one time, man. I stood up to speak. Powerful. I mean, I was fearful. I was afraid. I was scared. But, man, we went in and, we had these young guys looking at us. I've been arrested before. I've been to a juvenile detention center before. And so I kind of knew what that hardcore mindset mentality was going in, but I was still a little nervous, about speaking. And so I got up to speak, man. Those guys went from being these hardcore guys to crying, tears, like, man, I don't want to do wrong no more. I know I need to change my life around. And so, God began to use those types of experiences. My freshman year, we went to Ethiopia, Africa. I got a chance to go there, man. We helped build a school. We're feeding kids. And so now my mind is being like blown away and expanded because I'm traveling around the world. The next summer I went to Zambia. Summer after that, went back to Zambia again. Took a year off of school, did mission work, traveled around the world, went to India, Sri Lanka, do tsunami relief. I mean, by the time I graduated from college, I traveled over 96,000 miles, volunteered over 26,000 hours in, service to humanity and sharing, the good news about Christ, man, in a variety of ways. And so, again, I take all, had my house not burned down, had my house not caught on fire, I don't think we would be having this conversation today. And I don't think that's the journey that I would be on.
I love where God's taking you, man. It's such a great story, and you're a really good storyteller. And I think that's important for those listening to know that your testimony, not just Taurus's, not just mine, but those listening on this podcast right now, man, it matters. And so you got to be able to tell it, and you got to be able to share it so that people can feel inspired and feel influenced with what you have to say. And I know one of the things that you talk about in your book is a burden that you have, Taurus, for the young men and young ladies. Especially in your epilogue, you write that you've seen them squandering their potential by wasting their time, sitting on their talents, and throwing their opportunities out of the window of life. I know that you have 5 principles that you have put together to share with every young man that they need to know as they pursue relationships. Tell me about the burden that you have for young people now in trying to inspire them, to point them to Christ, but to do it in the way that would be God honoring, especially where you are today in the season of life that God has you. Tell us about that burden and the encouragement that you have for these young people.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. It's like, man, when you've been somewhere, you've been there, done that, you've been down this road or that road, and you know that there's danger there. Then I think it's irresponsible to see someone going down that same path and not to say anything. And so, I really, my 25th birthday, I was praying, God, give me clarity on your purpose for my life, right? And I think, having given my life to Christ at 19, that's kind of that. I think when I got to college, I started hearing this word purpose a lot, right? Purpose, purpose, purpose. People talking about purpose.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Lord, what's your purpose for my life? I want a crystal clear purpose, statement, if you will. Rick Warren, purpose driven life, right? So,
Yep.
so I'm like, man, okay, I want to, give me some clarity on that. And on my birthday, you know, God gave me clarity, and that clarity is that my purpose is to help young people discover their purpose, right?
Yeah.
That's my purpose, to help young people discover their purpose. And man, I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger, and when I see young men in particular, when I see young ladies who are making bad choices,
Yeah.
it's something that bothers me. Like, it literally bothers me. There'll be times where I'm just driving along and I see a young man. I may just stop. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. And I just may go up to him and just pray with him. Introduce myself to him, of course, and just, hey, man, look, I just saw you walking down the street, and I just felt impressed to come and let you know that God has a purpose and plan for your life. And if you ever need some help in trying to, discover that, figure that thing out, feel free to call me. That has happened on a number of occasions. But that passion really has driven me to launch. We have a ministry called Greater Youth Movement, where we have about 40 to 50 young people who volunteer their time. And our mission is to help at-risk youth overcome adversity, right? And of course, we know that we can overcome anything through Christ. And so we have programs every single week where we go out to the community and we go to the projects in particular, and we have young people from teenage, elementary age school, elementary K through 12, let me put it that way. And where we minister to them, we teach them Bible stories, we teach them, life skills, character, leadership. We give them opportunities to serve and give back to their own community. And so the Greater Youth Movement is something that, I really praise God for, because it grew out of my experience going through college and being a part of an organization that gave me the opportunity that I had to grow as a leader, to grow as a person in my relationship with God, as well as in my gifts and talents. And so that passion is being directed in that particular way right now.
A couple more questions here with Taurus Montgomery on the podcast. His book is called Set on Fire: How Life's Devastations Can Lead to Your Destiny. We'll tell you about how you can pick up that book at the end of this interview. I want to ask you, if it's okay, Taurus, about your dad. Today, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know even if he's still alive or if you have a relationship with him. You can
he's
share.
Still alive.
He's still alive. Tell us about forgiveness. I wrote a book about forgiveness, and I'm always curious when people go through difficult seasons, especially when it has that father wound and that abusiveness that's in there, how you were able to walk through that to get to a place to forgive, if you have forgiven your dad, and what that relationship is like today.
Right. So I remember it was the summer of 2007, I believe. Every summer I was going overseas. I'm going to Ethiopia. I'm going to Zambia. I'm going to India. I'm going to, Sri Lanka. I'm going to all these different places. But this particular summer, I felt God telling me, you need to go home. And so, I was like, go home. Okay, well, all right, God, I'm going home. So I went home. And while I'm home, I got a little job working with a guy trying to put some money in my pocket before I go back to school. And man, I had a conversation with one of my uncles, and my dad's brother, one of my uncles. His name is Michael, and he was talking to me. And he said something to me that just blew my mind. He said, Taurus, your dad, he kind of feels that he's lost you, and that there's no hope for your relationship. He recognized he's done some things wrong, and and he told me that I need to forgive my father. I need to go and tell. He told me that I need to forgive my father, and I was like, I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks, man, because that thought had never crossed my mind. It had never crossed my mind that I should be going to him to tell him I forgive him. If anything, he should be coming to me and saying I'm sorry. That was so over the next 2 weeks. Oh man, I couldn't sleep at night. There were times I would cry myself to sleep, and then I started getting answers as to why. Like when I would go home or just be around him, period. Especially, I had given my life to Christ, came to, left home. And anytime I would go back for, like a break or whatever, school break, anytime I would go back, anytime I went around him, there was this anger, this frustration, I mean, just blood boiling. He hadn't said anything, he hadn't done anything, but every time I go around, now here's what it is. You're talking about at least, 25 years of watching physical, verbal abuse from him to my mother. I don't, any young man watching his mother get beat up, kicked down the steps, called all kinds of names. Man, look, it only a miracle from God can prevent that person from doing some harm to whoever's inflicting that pain on that child's mother. And I know it was God that kept me back from physically harming my father, because I came very, very, very extremely close to doing that one time. I was like 14, 15 years old, but that's another story. But so now I'm wrestling with God with forgiveness, and I'm telling God the same thing. If anything, God, he should be coming to me and saying that he's sorry for what he did, right? So I'm wrestling through it. I'm praying through it. I think I called, some of my, kind of mentors and asked them, what they thought I should do and all this type of stuff. And man, so I got to the point where I realized, okay, God is telling me to do this. And here's the thing that I think this line is in the book that I kind of felt, since God telling me, the lesson of God telling me, listen, son, you cannot go farther until you forgive your father. You cannot go farther with me until you forgive your father. And I was just like, okay, Lord, you're going to have to give me the strength to do this. And so I remember I went to him one morning. It took me a couple of days to just get the courage to go and say to him, what I felt God was telling me. And I went to him. We sitting on the edge of his bed. And I said, Dad, man, I got something I want to tell you. I said, I've been harboring these feelings of hatred and anger and resentment, bitterness for all these years. And, for the things that I saw you do. And I just want to let you know that I forgive you. And I don't even recall what he said. It wasn't anything like he didn't take any personal responsibility. Right. He didn't take any personal responsibility. He didn't say what I thought he should have said in terms of, what I'm saying? Like when this is serious stuff and you don't know what it took for me to actually come to you and say this to you. And so I just kind of felt like he didn't really get it. But the lesson that I learned, God, began to really help me understand is that forgiveness more often than not is more so for you rather than for the person that you're forgiving. Absolutely. Because now I no longer, I can go around him and the blood boiling is no longer there. The bitterness is no longer there. The resentment is no longer there. And I feel set free. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people, I've met a lot of people, who are in their adulthood right now, who still are hanging on to past hurt by their mom or by their dad or by somebody, who raised them, and it's crippling them from truly becoming who God created them to be to reach their full potential. And so I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this right now, if there's somebody to forgive, pray and ask God's help, and he'll give you the power and strength to forgive them.
You spoke truth there, my friend. Taurus, this has been great. Thanks for being here on the show. Last question I want to ask you is, what are you learning from God right now? What is he teaching you today where he has you? You're a husband, you're a dad. You've been doing this for a while now, really just going out and having a passion to preach God's word and to help others. What are you learning from God right now in this season of life?
Man. Well, I would say, two things, and that is, work and rest. I'm actually on a 8-week sabbatical right now. I took a sabbatical because I've been doing a lot of work, and without getting a lot of rest. And so, I guess the season I'm in right now is that, this season of, this balance of, you can work, grind, and I'm a work oriented person. Like I like, if I have a goal or a dream, something I'm trying to do, I want to get after it, right? But the danger sometimes that I've faced with is that sometimes I'm working and I'm overworking, and so much so that I'm trying to do stuff in my own strength rather working from a place of resting in God. There's a passage in I think it's 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and this is when Jehoshaphat says, the famous verse is, this battle is not yours, it's the Lord's, right?
Yeah.
Well, before that, he prays this prayer of and I call it a prayer of total dependence, right? He prays this prayer. And he says, I think it's verse 11, he says, God, this enemy, they're coming to attack us. And these are people that we actually spared at one time. But he says, we are powerless and we don't know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. And that line right there really stands out to me because the previous chapters, I'm a preacher, man. I'm getting to the word now.
That's okay.
The previous chapter, literally uses the term as it's describing Jehoshaphat. It described him as powerful. Like it literally described him as powerful. It's describing how big his army is. It's describing, these cities that he's built, these fortified cities that he's built. It's describing his great power, and it says that he had become very powerful. But here you have a couple of chapters later when he is sensing his need for God, he says that he himself is powerless. And I'm just like, man, here is someone who had resources, who had experience, who had some level of power, but still had this radical, crazy dependence upon God in spite of the so-called power that he had. And so what I'm sensing is, yeah, man, you may be talented, you might have experience, you might have financial resources, you might have, access to some assistance, but at the end of the day, the battle will not be won in fighting in your own strength, but in total dependence upon Christ. And so I'm at a season right now where I'm just asking God, Lord, help me to have total dependence upon you to accomplish the things that you've placed on my heart to do.
He is Taurus Montgomery. He's the pastor at Pioneer Memorial Church in Harbor of Hope in Michigan. His new book is called Set on Fire, How Life's Devastations Can Lead You to Your Destiny. You're also speaking and traveling a lot, Taurus. How can people get in touch with you, learn more, get a copy of this book, and just kind of stay in touch with you?
Sure. The easiest way is my website, www.taurus, Taurus, Montgomery, Taurus Montgomery. Taurus like the car Ford Taurus, yep. Montgomery like Montgomery, Alabama. TaurusMontgomery.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'll even put my phone number out there, 269-923-9274. Again, 269-923-9274. I'd love to hear from you. Come speak at your event, talk to some young people for you, whatever opportunities that may be available, or just share a word of encouragement, pray with you, however you feel led to call, I'm here to serve.
Taurus, you're the first person in over 350 interviews that I've done that's ever put their phone number out there. So you have you're a very brave soul, but I understand your heart and why you do that. And I think it'd be
Yeah.
great to have some testimonies from you, testimonials, I should say, in like 5-6 months of people that actually called you just from listening to this podcast. And listen, I hope our paths cross again. I really do. I think
Man, for
I'm
sure.
so glad that we were connected at the Nations of Coaches event. Your story is awesome, and I'll be praying for you. And thank you for being here and sharing it with us on the podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Sir. Thank you.
And great stuff there from Taurus Montgomery joining us on Sports Spectrum's podcast. What a life that he has lived, and he's making a difference. He really is. He's using his story, his pain, for his purpose in helping others, especially young people. And again, that website, taurusmontgomery.com, taurusmontgomery.com. And there's a lot of information about him, about booking him for speaking. He even gave his cell phone number out of respect. I'm not going to give that out again, but I'll let you go back and listen if you want to call him, if you want to text him and let him know that you heard his journey and story here on Sports Spectrum. Go ahead and do that. I love that he's that open about it. You can also go to his website and order his book. Again, it's called Set on Fire: How Life's Devastations Can Lead You to Your Destiny. And Taurus is awesome, man. I hope we can get him back on the show and tell more stories, because he is the real deal. Many thanks to Taurus, and many thanks to Compassion International. They sponsor this podcast, and we love Compassion. You can learn more about how to release a child from poverty for just $38 a month, tax deductible. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. Sponsor a child today. I promise you, you won't regret it. It's a great decision. It will help you release a child from poverty, and it will give that child something that every child deserves, and that is hope. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. Pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Thanks to Taurus, thanks to Compassion, and thanks to you for listening. You can reach us on our website, sportspectrum.com. We got daily devotionals, articles all day long. This podcast, among 300 plus podcast interviews, archival content, lots of great stuff there. The website, that's the place to bookmark, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with a new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. We love you guys. Have a great rest of your day.